So thank you, Tom. I wanted to throw a couple of questions from that have been fed in right now. And again, guys, there's no way I'm going to be able to ask Tom all of the questions. In fact, I'm very excited the fact that I've found somebody who takes as long to answer questions as I do on there. It's like a kindred spirit on there. It's usually the biggest issue most people have is how long it takes me to answer questions. But this is brilliant because, again, context is definitive. And being able to bring in different aspects of context to build not an answer, but a complete level of awareness around something is far better than trying to bullet hole an answer without the context. So on that note, Tom, you often say that obviously we are in a kindergarten schoolhouse, and we can relate to that based on how tight the rule set is. In other words, that if we were in a dream-based type reality, then where the rule sets aren't as tight, then with low consciousness or consciousness isn't evolved, we'd kind of use that to our advantage in our ego by using it to collect stuff or get stuff and bypass some of the rule sets and the consequences. Whether that's, teleporting into the ladies' locker room or, reaching your hand through the bank vault or whatever it may be. So we know we're kind of in a kindergarten. As our consciousness rises through many of the movies we star in, and hopefully on a trajectory that evolves, we can evolve into other realities. You've obviously had experience in your current packet of visiting many different realities, some of which are similar to this, some of which are, let's just say, would be more college than kindergarten. And I guess the higher you go in your evolution of consciousness, the more you're entrusted with rule sets that aren't as tight. So obviously we are in a multiplayer game. What is the experience obviously in this reality? I think that love being the destination, which is the natural extrapolation of the word cooperation, is pretty much built in the elusive obvious. And one of the ways that I've seen the system in its genius do that, in my opinion, is that you have, for example, masculine and feminine. In other words, we need to learn how to get along or we go extinct. It's kind of built into the rule set. Now, obviously, at low levels of consciousness and the animal kingdom, for example, we have hormones and innate drivers that kind of push us towards that. But as we evolve our consciousness, anything outside of cooperation, you kind of go to jail for. So, it's kind of built into the rule set that we're here to evolve through being able to have union and come together rather than oppose. Otherwise, we kind of wipe ourselves out. How does that work in a non-physical reality? In other words, obviously there is biology here that's in play, but what is, how do you reproduce in a non-physical sense rather than a physical sense? And in other words, I guess NPMR sex is the way to kind of frame that for those that haven't caught on to following the line of thought there. But that has been a question that's popped up. So I wanted to throw that out for a little bit of more lightheartedness, if indeed it does. Throw that up.
Yes. There are many different virtual reality frames out there. As you say, some of them have very tight rule sets, which means every energy exchange is defined. Our physical reality it looks and acts physical because it has such a tight rule set that everything abides by this physical causality. This causality is basically the rules. So if you go to a dream reality, that's not true. In a dream reality, you can teleport, you can fly, you can do all sorts of things that you can't do here because their rule set is not so tight. There are some rules there as well, but they're very lax, and there's much that you can do just by thinking about doing it, just by having the intent to do it, you can do it. So in our virtual reality, this virtual reality was not programmed, it evolved from, like I say, initial conditions and a rule set. Initial conditions were what? A ball of plasma, high temperature, high energy. When the run button was hit, that ball of plasma could change according to the rule set. The rule set being physics. Now that's the big digital bang. It's a simulation. And that simulation then went on to evolve. And eventually here we are. We avatars are here. So that simulation was evolved that way. according to that rule set. Now, the dream reality wasn't like that. The dream reality is just you can think of it as a data stream between you and a larger consciousness system. You can think of it like that, or between you and other people, or even between you and parts of yourself. You know, you are consciousness. You can create data streams. You create data. We call that imagination, but that imagination is a lot more powerful than most of us give it credit for. Other IUCs create information streams, and the system creates data streams. Those are the only three sources. So when you're in a virtual reality, you're getting a source of data that defines that reality. Now, Peter's question was heading more to we have male, female here in this reality because that's how it evolved. That was the evolution. You know, sexuality is a part of the evolution of things, from microbes, splitting their cells and making new to humans and vertebrates and invertebrates. And there's lots of different variations on sexuality, but basically that's part of this rule set and the way this particular virtual reality evolved. Once you get out of tight rule set virtual realities, there is no procreation. There is no sexuality there. Now, other virtual realities with tight rule sets, indeed, there is. That's one of the ways that you get a stable reality going, is that it's self-perpetuating, right? You need that. But in the non-physical, there is something that's similar to sexuality, but it's entirely different. Procreation has nothing to do with it. It is a sharing, a combining, a joining that two people or three people, or six people, doesn't matter, but it's a sharing that is just, I shouldn't say just, I was going to say just as intimate, but actually it's more intimate than sexuality here in the physical. So it is a complete sharing of yourself at your being level, at your most honest with another person. And indeed, during that sharing, you do become one. It is the deepest kind of experience of relationship and connectedness that you can have to another person. So that can take place in the non-physical as well, but it's not for procreation. There's nothing really sexual about it in the sense that we talk about sexuality. There's no, body parts, there's nothing to do. It's just a merging of several personalities. And in that merging, you don't really have, it's not really you and me, or me and them, or them and us. It's not two things. It all becomes one thing, a total sharing. So there is that available that is non-physical. It's a non-physical connectedness with things. And you begin to share at a level that's probably not possible here. Here, our sexuality is more of a physical thing. Now, it comes with its spiritual and its emotional components, no doubt. Those are very, very important. It's not just physical, but it is connected strongly with physical. In non-physical realities, all of the realities to us are non-physical, but in loose rule set realities, it's just two people kind of doing the ultimate sharing thing. And it is a very beautiful and a very profound thing to do. And actually, you can do that with the larger consciousness system. For any of you who have had that experience, you can connect to the larger consciousness system in such a way as to experience being as it is being, unite and become one with it. And when you do that, you lose your own identity. It's no longer you. You're just a part of everything. You're a part of every leaf, every blade of grass, every every person, every animal, everything. You are everything. And love is the total emotion that you feel. That is a very profound thing. Some people, some fair number of people who do near-death experiences find that experience where they make that connection with the larger consciousness system and, kind of merge into being at one with it. And it's a very profound and life-changing thing. But that experience doesn't have to be with a larger conscious system. You can be with any other being. You can make that connection, but it has to be obviously, agreeable to all taking part in it. It's not something you can do to somebody, sneak up on them and, something like that. It's something that has to be mutually joined, but it's an experience that is hard to describe. And if you have had that experience, it will change you. And it's I don't know of anybody that has had it that didn't find it profound and life-changing. So, but you can do that. It's available. You can just, if you can get into that intuitive state, produce a good working relationship with a larger conscious system and just connect with it, it will be glad to do that. And it will be something that will be unlike anything you've ever experienced. And you can do it as often as you like. But, and I talk about how wonderful experience it is, but actually, though you can do it as often as you would like once you have facility in the larger system, generally you don't do it very often because things that profound and that deep aren't things you just do every day. So even though it's such a wonderful experience, it's something that happens only occasionally, only when it needs to. Not because you just want to go, let's go do that again because it was fun. So it doesn't get into that sort of thing. It's only when it needs to. So that's kind of non-physical sex is not really a male-female thing. There really isn't any gender in the non-physical. Gender has to do with the way this virtual reality evolved itself. Non-physically, gender exists in the non-physical only because entities have preferences and see themselves as certain ways. So when you run into entities in the non-physical and they're male or female, it's not because they, are male and female in the way we are here. It's just they have a preference. Their style is male, their style is female, and they can change that style if they wish. Or they may, they may use both styles, but mostly you run into people who are not all that solidly gender differentiated, but they tend to act in a way that you tend to judge them as male or female because you tend to put people in that category. We do. That's just the way we are. So you interact with a being, and depending on that being and how forward they are and how brusque they are and how this and that, you tend to make them male or female. But that's your own creation, not necessarily that entities have that gender. We do that because that's our habit. Everybody we see and meet, that's the first thing we notice about them. What sex are they? What's their gender? That's a very important thing to us. And we do that without even thinking about it. So when we meet people in the non-physical, we tend to do the same thing. And it doesn't mean that they have gender. It just means we stick them into gender categories based on their behavior and how they interact with us. So gender doesn't really exist out there. It's only an attribute of the way this virtual reality worked. Now, other virtual realities with tight rule sets that are physical, they seem physical because every detail is according to a causality of their rule set, then they mostly do have gender and they do have sexuality. The ones that I've been to all tend to have some sort of procreation going there because procreation is needed for the evolution to evolve. You need things that change. Procreation is necessary for the evolution. Otherwise, you just have a fixed number of things and that's just it. They just interact and pretty soon that would go stale. You have to have things have to be renewable all the time. That's why when you go back as a free will awareness unit, you go back with only quality, not with memory, because you don't want things to get stale. You want to always have to deal with things like it's the first time you ever saw it. So you're dealing with it from the being level. You're not gaming the system with your intellectual level. Oh yeah, I know the right answer to that. I should do this here. I should do that there. Now you're gaming the system. It's not really acting out of who you are. You're acting out of who you'd like to be or who you think you are or who you want to be. So you can't have that memory. You have to come back and actually be exactly who you are as that piece of consciousness without memory. That keeps it honest. That keeps it out of your intellect.
Love that. Excellent. Just like if you're an actor coming into another movie, why would you want to remember all of the lines of the previous movies and stuff? Because it would confuse you in this one. And then you wouldn't be able to be authentic in your experience of the scene that you're in. Yeah, no, it makes total sense.
Well, people tend to paint themselves into corner with their beliefs and with their egos. And, pretty soon they've got this feeling, oh, I've been there, done that. I know almost everything that's important to know. And when they do that, change doesn't happen much. They don't change anymore. They just keep on keeping on. And that's what I call painting themselves into a corner. Well, if you carried that over from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, that would be a killer of your ability to grow up and to change. So you've got to start from your being level. You have to re-express who you are through a totally new environment and a new avatar. But the expression of who you are is really who you are. That's your consciousness. But the way you get to express that can't be from a cheat sheet or from memory or from anything else. It's got to come just out of you. It's got to be honest and clear. And that's why taking memory along with you would be a really bad idea.
Yeah. So if I recall the distinction between sort of ego versus pseudo humility under the guise of, I guess we'd call it spiritual ego, and people that think, oh, I'm done now. And I recall you mentioning that you'd actually been over to visit the I'm done reality, or what it was, to explore that question. So I share a little bit on that.
Okay. Yes, I brought that up because there are some people you hear about, and I don't know, I guess it's more in the East because they're more into reincarnation than the Westerners, but you'll hear this idea that this is my last time around. We're on this kind of the Buddhist idea. We're on this wheel of birth and rebirth until we become enlightened. And then once we're enlightened, then we're out of here. We evolve beyond this reality frame and we're not here anymore. And then I hear people saying, oh, this is my last incarnation. I'm done. I'm a very evolved person. I'm enlightened and this is my last time here. It's not the way it works. That's not the way it works. There is no done. Okay, you're never done. Evolution is an open-ended process. It's never done. Lowering entropy is a process that you can get closer and closer to zero entropy, but you can never get there. And to lower entropy, you have to put energy in. To lower entropy in a system, you have to put energy into that system. Systems don't just naturally lower their entropy. If you leave a system alone, it naturally raises its entropy. Unless you put work in to lower it, its entropy will just grow. So these people who think that they are done generally are not nearly as enlightened as they think they are, or they wouldn't feel done. After all, what is the purpose here? It's to grow up and become love. Love is about other, not about self. This idea of I'm done, I'm going to get out of this hellhole. I'm not coming back here anymore to this stinking place. I'm out of here. That sounds an awful lot about self, not so much about other. That doesn't sound like, how can I help? That sounds like, how can I get out of this place? It's all about me. So the fact is, you're never done. There's always someplace to help. There's always something that you can do. There's always something you can give. And as long as there are people who need help, who aren't grown up yet, then you're needed to help. So it's not a matter of graduating, becoming enlightened, and then going to where the done people go, the people who are done with this growing up thing. They're all grown up now, so they're done. And when I was talking about this, I told them I was in a reality that my nickname for it is the done reality. That's where people went when they were done. And what happened is that their avatar died. They felt that they were enlightened. This was their last time. And when it came time for for them to have another experience with another avatar, they said, "No, I'm done. I've learned everything and I'm grown up and I don't need any of that anymore." And they were really very insistent about being done. So you can't force anybody to do anything. They were convinced they were done. So they got put into a virtual reality where the only people there were people who felt they were done and did not want to go on further because they were already enlightened and had nothing else to learn. So I went to this done reality. I was just sent there. The larger conscious system sends me places just so I can observe and learn. So this was many years ago that I went to this done reality, and I wasn't quite sure what it was I was supposed to learn. But when I got there, everybody was very polite. Everybody was very nice. And basically it was, I don't know, like a social club. There were that people were interacting and talking to each other, and it was just a big social club. But I noticed after I'd been there some number of days, that there were cliques that had formed up. There were some people who obviously were more done than others. There were people who were kind of saying not so positive things about that group over there. And I began to see that they were de-evolving in this place for those that were done, because they were no longer putting energy they were no longer trying and putting effort into their growth and becoming love. They were de-evolving. And yes, it was a gentle place. It was generally a kind place. But when if you weren't just a visitor, I was there for many days. And if you weren't just a visitor, you started seeing cracks in that veneer of ego and beliefs and other things that were not done at all. They were de-evolving. And I noticed that eventually a person would get to the point that they realized it. They looked around and they realized that they were entrapped in ego and, being more done than other people and having groups that were good groups and goods that weren't so groups. And all of that stuff was happening again. And when they did realize, they disappear. They pop out of there and were gone. So there was always a lot of turnover. And what happened is they went back to Transition Central and said, "Hey, I'm ready for my next experience. Find me a good avatar." They wanted to get back into the game, because just standing around in social space, de-evolving, was not working. So that's what happens to people who believe they're done. They go to the done reality and de-evolve until they realize they've de-evolved to the point that they get back in it. Now they have to make up. They have to dig themselves out of that hole. So you never get to zero entropy. You can get close. You can get asymptotic. You can approach it, but you have to put in effort to do that. That's the second law of thermodynamics, and it works everywhere. And that is that if you just have a system and you don't put any energy into it, it will begin to decay and fall apart. It will de-evolve. So do we. So there is no, I'm done. I no longer have to work on this because I'm perfect. You will, as soon as you say that, you've already proven that you're not perfect and that you need to keep working on it. So that's the way it is. So there are realities for people of all sorts. And you don't always have to come back to this virtual reality. You can go to some other physical type virtual reality, and I've been to a dozen or more of them that are physical. But for the most part, I think you'd be just as well off, if not better, right here. This is one of the better realities to be in. Many of them are not really doing as well as we are, if you can imagine that. We think that we are really failing here terribly, but a lot of that failure is opportunity. We have, for the first time ever as a human race, the ability to take a great leap forward spiritually. It's something that could happen in decades or a century. We're closer than we've ever been. We're making more progress than we ever have. So it's good. These are very exciting times to be in this particular reality. We have opportunities for big breakthroughs, and that I look forward to that. I'm an optimist, so I always see the bright light, not the black cloud. So, but we've never had that opportunity before. We've always had bubbles of enlightenment. We've always had people who understood the big picture. Where Buddha is 2,500 years old. So he understood this was a virtual reality. He said this reality was an illusion. It's sort of the same thing as calling it a virtual reality. And there were the Hindus before the Buddha. Buddha came out of the Hindu culture, and they had many of the similar kinds of ideas. And we've had prophets, and we've had wise people, and we've had philosophers who have understood the nature of this reality and understood it as a bigger reality, but they've never been mainstream. They've always been off on the sidelines, and there's been groups on the sideline, and people now, kind of often bifurcate themselves. They'll have one part of them that kind of intellectually grasps that bigger philosophy, but then there's another part of them that, goes right back to work and tries to take advantage of people. So we kind of live burning that candle at both ends, because we attach to it, not from the being level, but from the intellectual level. But it's still not mainstream. Mainstream, being level, it's always been outside in the margins. And now we have the opportunity for it to go mainstream. And we can talk about that if that's something that you are interested in. But I don't want to go off on too many excursions here.
Absolutely. I think that's what everybody would be interested in, to be fair, Tom, because it's, again, you're talking to the nature of people here. And by the way, guys, if I hear any one of you say, "Oh, I've done module 12, I'm done," right? and we will be sending you to the done reality. All right? And so you pop back in and reset EMF. Okay. All good. But yeah, Tom, please continue to share.
Oh, well, okay. I think that we are on the cusp of big changes, that we indeed in the near future, how near, I don't know, probably no more than 2 or 3 decades, probably, hopefully not as much as another millennia, hopefully less than this century, but we have the opportunity. Whether we'll grasp that opportunity or not is another thing. But we have all the things that are necessary. One, we have whom I call the scientists, particularly the physicists, the high priests of Western culture. I call them the high priests of Western culture, although Western culture pretty much taken over the world. Western culture, Eastern culture is all starting to look more or less the same as economics drives those cultures. But in any case, the high priests are the ones that tell everybody else what to believe, what's true. And in days of old, it was the high priests of whatever religion was in favor at the time that told everybody else what was true and what to believe. Now the scientists have that role. The scientists say, this is it, this is the truth. Then everybody goes, scientists said it, it's true. So they're the new high priests. And because of quantum physics, the physicists will eventually, maybe a decade, maybe less, get to the point where they will claim that indeed, we know for sure this is a virtual reality. because that's where their physics has been pointing for almost 100 years. It's been pointing that direction, and it's getting harder and harder to ignore. More and more research keeps pointing in that same direction. Eventually, and you know, a very well-known physicist, Max Planck, who helped create quantum physics, said that physics progresses one funeral at a time. What he was saying was that as the old guard dies out, the new people come in with a little bigger picture and a little fewer beliefs. You know, they come in with a little more open minds, and that takes time. So it's not something that happens quickly. It happens very slowly. So we've been on this very slow thing now for a century. That was back in 1920, you know, now here we are 2020, 100 years later, and it's grown quite a bit, but it's still a minority. But that minority is growing quickly. So I think in the next couple of decades, we'll see that physics will get to the point that they will say, it is a fact that this is a computed reality, a reality based on information. That will be obvious. And hopefully some of these experiments that I'm doing will help you know, push that in that direction. But in any case, when they say that, they won't mean for anybody to take it any further than that. That will just be a statement. But when the rest of the world hears that, it's going to change everything. That will be a sea state change, because people will say, well, if this is a virtual reality, who's the programmer? And where's the computer? And you know, how did this come about? Who made this reality, this virtual reality? Because virtual realities, remember, have to be from outside of us, not inside of us. They come from the non-physical, from our perspective, being inside. So it says something's in the non-physical is really the fundamental thing, not us. Physical thing is not the fundamental thing. Well, that's a really a big thing, you know, as far as philosophy and you know, to have that be spoken by the high priests of science who will make it go mainstream. And at that point, people will be looking for answers. Well, what does that mean? What are the logical consequences of this being a virtual reality? And if they stick to their logic, they will see that there is only one solution to that, and that is consciousness is the computer. Because there's lots of things to point evidence at that. And if consciousness is a computer, all you have to do is look at consciousness as the information system evolving by lowering its entropy. And that leads you right to, in a social system, love is the answer. It's all about growing up. So if we can make those logical steps, and those logical steps aren't just choices, those are the only steps that actually are logical. There isn't any other place to go. If you go in any other direction other than that, you end up with something that is not logical. So if they follow the logic, which in general they will, given time, you know, it might take decades, but given time, that logic will lead us to that conclusion. And when that becomes the conclusion, not of just people in a small group on the sideline and in the margins, but that becomes mainstream, because the physicists started it as mainstream, then because we have an internet that connects all of us, this news isn't going to just grow up in a little group someplace in the Himalayas. You know, this isn't going to just, you know, stay in a little circle someplace. This will immediately, all this discussion, all of this growing, all of this understanding is going to take place on the internet, and everybody's going to have access to it. So you take that and add that to the fact that if you if you could do a poll of the just random people out of the 7.5 billion of us that are on this planet now, if you could just randomly pick out, you know, 100,000 of them and ask the question, how do you think we're doing, we as a human race? How do you think we're doing, you know, with us and our civilization, whatever? Are we doing all right? You think things are pretty good? Are we on the right track? I think you'd find that almost everybody from every culture would say, no, it's broken. There's something wrong here. We're not doing very well. The world is a terrible place. It could be so much better. So you have almost a universal attitude that we could do and need to do better, but no one really has an idea how that might work or what that could be. Most people think, well, what we got's just all there is, and we just have to work with that. You know, what could we do better? Well, once we have this idea of this is a virtual reality and love is the answer, and we're here to grow up and become love and, you know, about choices, once that logic becomes accepted in the mainstream, you're going to see a lot of change. At first, it'll be mostly acting, you know, people trying to do what they think they should be doing, but that faking it until we make it, many will make it because they'll see that now. That's what the game is. I'm in a virtual reality game. It's a virtual reality entropy reduction trainer. Well, okay, I know what the game is. Now I'm going to win. I'm going to get rid of that fear, get rid of that ego, get rid of those beliefs, and I'm going to make myself better because I'll be happier and whatever. So once that becomes well known, I think we'll take a great leap forward. And I think a lot of the problems we have in our institutions with the law, you know, with politics, with the economics, all that stuff will just straighten itself out once we get ourselves straightened out. So I think we have a chance in maybe 3 decades, probably at the shortest, up to maybe at the end of the century, to really take a giant leap forward. Now, we're not going to get to the end. Most of the people will still be faking it, but at least it'll be a lot more civilized place to be in with all those people faking it. And many of them will make it because they understand the nature of the game now. So that will probably take another century before most people have made it. That'll take a lot longer, but at least I think the ball will start rolling in that direction in the near future. So I'm very positive about that. And why is it that it seems that things are getting uglier and uglier? That if we go back just a few decades, they weren't as ugly as they are now? Well, I think that's kind of the last gasp, the last big hurrah for control, power, force. We're seeing change now. And, you know, change is hard. Getting rid of fear is hard. Fear pushes back. When you get rid of a fear, that fear will push back and try to make you not get rid of it. And you have to have the gumption and the courage to get rid of it, because you'll think, well, I need to change this. I get rid of this fear, and then you don't get rid of it. And that fear gets uglier and uglier and bigger. It growls, grows 2 heads and fangs, and just gets more and more fearsome. And until you finally get rid of it and find out, oh, that was just smoke. That really wasn't anything at all. That was just smoke. It was all in my head. I invented that fear. I made that fear. Anyway, when we get to that point, I think we have a real good chance, an opportunity. Like I say, I don't know whether we'll take that opportunity. Now, it could go the other way. It could go that when this is revealed as a virtual reality and that it's computed, if we don't have enough people who understand a bigger picture, then we're going to regress a little bit into back to religious wars. And the fact, my God's a better programmer than your God, you know. Yes, I knew it was a virtual reality, and my God's the one that programmed it. And if we go back to that kind of thing, well, that will be de-evolving. But hopefully, that will only be a small minority. And it'll take them probably a year before they think of that tactic to take. But, you know, there'll be once we find that there's something non-physical that is more fundamental than us, than our reality, and that this reality is a product of it, that creates a big power vacuum, you know, a big theological power vacuum. And there's going to be any number of people that want to step in and own that. Take that over, assume that power. And no doubt many of them will try. Hopefully we won't be that foolish, and we'll come through that out the other side, because people will have a bigger picture than that. I think we've grown up a lot individually over the last few hundred years that we're not quite as big a sucker for that ploy as we used to be, you know, back in maybe, 1600s or 1500s. kind of ate that up without question, but I don't think that'll be the case anymore. So at least we have a chance of skirting that problem. So that's what I think. I think this is a very exciting time to be here in this virtual reality, and people are coming into it to help us make that turn. People are coming here and gaining bigger pictures. I get a lot of young people show up at my events. They're not dominant, but you know, a lot of them. I've got a little boy who was 10 years old. He's older than that now, but he had read the book twice at 10 years old. And he not only read it, but he understood it. He could talk about it and ask good questions, just as good a question as any of the adults there. He was 10 years old. So we have people that are helping make this turn now. And look what happened with COVID. How many times have you know, flus and other illnesses like that come through here? Well, every year there's a flu season, right? Every year, you know, hundreds of thousands of people die from the flu, mostly old people, sometimes very young people, but it happens all the time. Back in 1900s, early 1900s, we had the Spanish flu, and somewhere between, you know, the guess is around 50 million people died from it. 500 million people were affected by it. I mean, that's huge compared to what we're having now. And everybody just kept on keeping on in business as usual. And we just did what we did because that's life. And, you know, people get sick and old people die, and there's just not much we can do about it. That was the attitude until this time the flu went around. And all over this planet, people said, we need to do something about this. We need to not just go out and give it to everybody else. We need to do what we can do to slow it down. We need to do what we can do to keep, you know, to protect the older people who are more vulnerable. And they did things about it. You know, they still are. People have stopped going to shoulder, pack them in kind of events. They've stopped, you know, they started wearing masks. They started, you know, keeping their distance because they care. It's important because it's going to kill a bunch of old people. Whole nursing homes get wiped out when one person gets it, and it spreads very quickly. So people feel responsible for their part in this. If they got it, then they might give it to somebody else. They certainly would. It's very catching. And that somebody else might give it to somebody else who gives it to somebody else who gives it to some old person in a nursing home, and then 70 people die 2 weeks later. Well, do you want to be that part of that chain? Does that seem like a good idea? That, I don't care, people get sick, you know, it doesn't seem like a very good approach. So this time, when that flu came around, just like it always does, maybe a little nastier and a little more contagious and a little nastier in its death rate, but not nearly as bad as the Spanish flu was in the 1920s. And we don't just say, it's life, people die, let's go on. It's not going to bother me. I'm healthy, I'm young, you know, I don't have any of those problems. Those people with problems, it's their problem, not my problem. We didn't do that. And we always have before, and we didn't now. I find that very encouraging. Oh, yes, people are complaining. People like to complain. You know, that's just the way to express negativity. If you're feeling negative, you start complaining. So, of course, people complain about it, but all over the planet, it wasn't like one place did it, but everybody, pretty much within the same month, started taking it seriously and seeing what could they do to be part of the solution, to make it a little easier. And if it was going to end up eventually infecting everybody, let's slow it down so that the hospitals and the people giving care to these people, which raise the survival rate a whole lot, don't get overwhelmed. You know, let's do what we can do. So I see things like that I think are positive. People didn't take a self-centered approach. It's not going to bother me, so why should I care? That's just self-centeredness. People cared. So we see things like this, and yeah, COVID has been a really terrible thing, but for the first time in the history of humanity, you've seen people all over this globe decide to do something to help people other than themselves. I think that's good. So I think we are we are in that space where we could make some giant leaps forward. We're getting closer to it. I see positive things going on. Yes, the ugliness seems to be getting uglier, but I think that's the last great hurrah of the control power force group. And I believe that we're going to see that in the next decade or so start to disappear. They're making as big a growl and as big a play as they can, but it won't last that long. The people are waking up and getting less self-centered. People are growing up. We won't put up with that sort of thing. Well, we're still a minority, but
there's a tipping point definitely coming. And we see it expressed in so many areas where there's social entrepreneurship, where it's, as you say, more children coming through new, asking questions that their parents would have thought, wow, where did that come from? When I was 4, I just wanted to know where my comics were, rather than like asking some level of deep, caring level of intuitive questions.
Mm-hmm.
So as Tom said, guys, we are in a very exciting time to be rendered into this reality. And we did choose it. I honestly believe that we resonate as a group here for a reason. We found each other for a reason. I found Tom for a reason. And we're naturally drawn to the people and the lessons that we're ready for. And I do believe that this is probably the best example of how we can be the example in these times. Remember, the pendulum doesn't care which side you push it from. As Tom said, you can get angry at the angry people, but you're doing nothing but pushing the pendulum back. And our job here is to be the example of it not swinging, not think we're doing good by pushing it from the other side. But you guys know this. And I think to find an empowering meaning, an empowering context in anything, whether it's looking at the examples of closeness of people caring through COVID, or whether it's your relationship to your movie, when it comes to being able to be the example of not having fear, there's so much we can be grateful for, and always find an angle to empower ourselves with, rather than get sucked into the justification that the mind will always come up with if not kept in check, for feeling disempowered. Remember, the mind's job is to justify your current emotional state incongruent with your behavior, and it'll find all the esoteric reasons to do that. But when you improve that signal to noise ratio, when you start connecting more to your being rather than your intellect, that noise goes away. The reasons why it sounded good to be negative or be fearful or not have hope, you realize, as Tom said, it's just smoke. It's the Scooby-Doo ghost, where it's the little midget with the 2 broomsticks holding up a sheet, scaring everybody in the mansion, and you finally stop, turn around and pull the sheet away, and you're thinking, you've got to be kidding me. That's what I was running from.
Yep.
And so, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to be the best example of who we can be, and therefore vicariously be the invitation to others without forcing that agenda on them, without doing anything other than understanding that the feedback we get is always the right feedback. And it may not be the feedback we want, because that's our ego likes to plan the path of least resistance by deluding ourselves into a comfort-centric experience when we are in a growth-centric experience. And when we get that, we relish the chance. We relish the fact that, hey, something? I chose this movie script. I'm here to act my heart out. I'm here to be the best version of me, and I'm not going to get it right every time, but great, because there's feedback built into the system that tells me, whether that's feeling bad, whether that's direct consequences, it doesn't matter. I'm in an intelligently derived system that is here to support who I am, that's here to nurture my growth. And to quote Abraham Hicks on something I love, and Tom certainly alluded to, you can't get it wrong and you can't run out of time. So when we take that off our shoulders, we can relax a little. So Tom may still get to see this spontaneous, or not so much spontaneous, this evolutionary leap in consciousness, whether it's in this particular avatar, where he kind of does look like the architect of the Matrix in some respect, as I think Dean mentioned earlier in one of his questions, or whether it's in a different avatar, coming through a different level. We will be placed where our consciousness can add the most value to the system and to ourselves. And when we relax into that awareness, we realize that everything in the physical world is subject to the law of impermanence. Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. And without those fears holding us back, we can shine and be the best versions of who we can. And the path tends to get a little easier and less painful at that point. You know, it's been, Tom, an absolute pleasure, my friend. I don't want to keep you much longer, and I'm just blessed that these guys have hung on for close to 3 hours to really be here, and they'll probably do more. But you know, I want to respect your time. It's been one of the greatest privileges of my growth coming across your work. And yeah, if I can do anything to leave a little thumbprint on some other people's movies by introducing them to your work, and they can do the same, then one by one we can make the world a better place. And Tom, please let the people know, how can they help, how can they raise awareness, where can they find you, how can they stay in touch?
Well, I have those 3 books, My Big Toe books. You can buy them anywhere you buy books. Yeah, that's the fat one. That's got all 3 books in one binding. You can get it at my website or from Amazon or your local bookstore, but you can get it for free. From when I first published the book, I put it out for free on Google Books, and you can look it up on Google Books and read it there if you wish. The website that I have will have a lot of other things there. There'll be a lot of other information. You brought up the male-female thing, and another book I'm working on and have been for at least a couple of decades, but just don't find the time, is called Primal Male, Primal Female. And it's basically, what does gender mean if you can strip away all the cultural overlays? And I have just a little bit of that sketched out in a piece of an outline that you can find on that website if you dig around in it. Also, I have, I don't know, probably over 1,000 hours of video on YouTube. Every time I give a talk someplace, every time I do an event, I try to take video of it and I put it up on YouTube for free. So it's all up there, and it's so much of it, it's kind of intimidating, but just go look around and see what strikes your fancy. And some of them are more for beginners. Some of them are long and going for hours and hours. When I do a workshop and I do it for 3 days, well, there's 3 days worth of video there. So don't let it overwhelm you. Just do it, 15, 20 minutes at a time. It may take a little time, but it's probably worth it. But it's better to do slowly anyway. When you read my books, read them slowly. Read a couple of pages and then think about, what does that page say to me? How does that represent my life? Or where is my life in there? And you should be able to find your life in there. Explanations for who you are and what you've been doing and the choices you've been making. You should find things there that talk to you. If not, don't worry about it. Like I say, it burns well in a fireplace. You don't have to. It's not the only path. I guess I should put it that way. There are many other paths. I don't have an exclusive on anything. I'm just one more person, that is offering a path, but there's thousands of paths that will work, and you need to find the one that works best for you. So if mine doesn't work best for you, then keep shopping, go look around, find something else. So I've got lots and lots of video, and in the near future, we're going to have ways to sort that video by subject. Been working on that for over a year, and eventually you'll be able to go in and find things you're looking for just by subject. But right now it's kind of a hit and miss. 1,000 hours of video is an awful lot of video to deal with. But anyway, you'll see that the titles tell you somewhat of what's in there, but a lot of them don't. Workshop just means it lasts for 3 days, and it's kind of over the whole theory from top to bottom. And I have I do events where I teach people how to remote view, how to heal, how to, Peter attended one of those workshops. And the idea there is I teach them about how to do all the paranormal things. And the point isn't doing paranormal things. Paranormal things are neither here nor there. Anybody can do them. The thing is that as you learn how to do them, it changes you. And the more successful you get in doing them, it changes you. And you find that by taking it seriously, you actually end up growing up. That's what's important about the paranormal things. Nothing paranormal is really all that important. And you can grow up without ever doing anything paranormal. You know, it's not required for anything, but it sometimes makes a good path for learning, because in order to do those things, you have to be able to find that intuitive space, that inner self. You have to find that control over your mind and your thinking, so you're not going off in 6 directions at once all the time. You have to reach that place in your life where you live in the being level, where everything works better, where everything just works out. You know, then life becomes perfect. You don't have to control anything because everything is just perfect the way it is. So if you don't learn those things, then you'll never really be very good at the paranormal things either, or you'll be marginally good, or you'll only do them occasionally, but not regular, you know, but not real well. So it's a good tool for learning intuitive skills. So that's why I teach about the paranormal. Not that the paranormal is too important, but it can be a conduit for skills. It can also be a conduit for ego. Some people go into the paranormal and it's all about, oh, look at the powers I've got, you know, and that, of course, is de-evolution. That's not evolution. That's going the wrong direction. So let's see, what else? Go to MBT events, mbtevents.com, and you will find the website of the people that help me organize all the things that I do. And you will find schedules and where I'm going to talk and what's going on. And they do healing, you know, they do some healing work there and other things. So MBT events is a good source for what's happening with Tom and where's he going to be next, kind of thing. So those are the places.
Thanks. Also, subscribe to Tom's YouTube channel, guys. And you know, some of you again can be a little put off sometimes by the kind of the behemoth of the book. And you know, there's a page in this book that I could open, and there's not comments on some part of it. But if you feel that's a little overwhelming, don't be put off. A lot of Tom's philosophy can be very easily taken in through his YouTube channel, and I recommend, as you know, in Module 1, the Calgary lectures, which is a really good place to go. And if you have a look at the first one, then you'll get a sense of whether you want to move forward or not. And then, as Tom says, just dive in, go. And the more you get in tune, the more you'll tune in with asking the system which videos you should watch next. And see where you're at. And I think I'll close the show with this, guys. One of the things that I love about one of the other gentlemen, you know, I'm a big fan of, the late, great David Hawkins, who wrote the book Power versus Force, who actually mapped out the map of consciousness. Should have won a Nobel Prize for it, but unfortunately, most of the people that give out Nobel Prizes don't rate high enough on the map of consciousness to be able to award it. That's my personal view. But just by reading something like Eye of the I, or I, Reality and Subjectivity, can raise consciousness itself by a significant amount of points, albeit somewhat temporary. Yeah, it's like you go to a motivational seminar, you get motivated, it falls off. But I think every single person on this call has felt their consciousness raise over the last 3 hours. And yeah, that is something that I'm grateful to Tom for being able to facilitate. You know, when you get this kind of quality of people, 1 + 1 + 1 is 111. And it really is a gift to be able to bring somebody like Tom in here to hold a space for us to, and more importantly, hold up a mirror for us to see our own greater selves in a context that allows us to evolve, or shows us a path to make the choices for ourselves to evolve. And I think all of us here can feel that. And again, on behalf of everybody in the entire EMF alumni, Tom, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Guys, feel free to unmute, give him some love. And I really hope to see you again soon in person, Tom. And go check him out, go to his events, and make Tom a part of your life.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you,
Tom.
Peter.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Tom.
You're very, very welcome. You know, knowledge is a wonderful thing. Shared knowledge is so much better. So I appreciate you all coming and allowing me to chat with you. My pleasure.
No worries.
Anytime, Tom. Please come back.